Today, we're going to be talking about why specifically you, act differently online. So think about the last time you left a comment on a thread or maybe on a YouTube video and you were kinder, meaner, harsher, more argumentative than you normally would be.
You're a shit-faced liar.
Brilliant. Here we go. Instant insult.
You say or do things that face-to-face you wouldn't be able to. So we know online behaviour bends the rules, but specifically how? Well, that's where John Suler, often considered the grandfather of cyber psychology, and his theory, the Online Disinhibition Effect, come into play. So the Online Disinhibition Effect is the idea that there are 6 axes along which our behaviour changes when we enter an online space. And it also goes away to explain how online environments shape our behaviour back. So John Suler is a clinical psychologist and professor. In 1996, he published The Psychology of Cyberspace, which was one of the first comprehensive explorations of how the online world and our mental health were interacting. And this was before YouTube, before Facebook, before smartphones. John Suler was already asking, how do people interact online? How do they fall in love? How do they fight? How does it shape who we are and what our identity is?
Baby, don't be such of a bitch.
I wasn't being a bitch. I was telling the truth. Harry's gay and I know it.
You're just a direction hater.
And then in 2004, he published The Online Disinhibition Effect, which is still one of, if not the most widely cited papers in regard to cyber psychology. So Suler wasn't just trying to observe trolls or flame wars. He was trying to understand and come up with a clinical framework that would allow other psychologists and other people to start to understand online environments and the interaction with our minds. What is the Online Disinhibition Effect? Well, the Online Disinhibition Effect is used to describe how people behave differently online, and as I said, over 6 axes. Now, it's important to note that the disinhibition effect is divided into 2 categories: benign, which can either be positive or neutral, or toxic, where the behaviors that the online disinhibition unlocks are problematic, dangerous, or destructive. Suler emphasized that this wasn't about revealing a truer self, and in that way perhaps disinhibition is the wrong word, but about how our personality is made up of different constellations and ideas and identities, and that just like in a real world where we act differently in the pub.
Come on, Mark, turn it on, play the game. Oh, naughty, you've combined metric and imperial. You might get an interdenominational, from mixing the 2 measurement systems, a hangover of that kind.
To at work.
A sales push, pulling an all-nighter. One of the few in my Spitfire. Who am I kidding? I probably would have crashed my training plane during the phony war.
To at home with our family. So
next up, we'll be learning how to inject heroin into our armpits.
to in an online space, do we change and moderate how we act depending on the space and company? So the 6 axes are dissociative anonymity, invisibility, asynchronicity, solipsistic introjection, dissociative imagination, and minimization of status and authority. So the first factor is dissociative anonymity, which is the idea that you don't or can't know me. So it's about the separation people make between their online behaviors and their offline self. We find that when usernames can be fake and profile pictures can be anything, and ultimately your post will disappear in an ever-increasing scrolling feed, people tend to start to feel detached from the responsibility of their actions. And once again, this can be benign or toxic. People can feel more empowered to engage in whistleblowing or to raise grievances or distress when it isn't necessarily attached to their real name. Or people may feel more comfortable expressing taboo or extreme subjects, or even entering into those spaces where images may be being shared, or they may engage in trolling behavior because they feel that their actions are just happening online, and that much like how they are separating their online self from their offline self, an assumption that the people they are targeting are in a similar boat. The anonymity allows compartmentalization of actions and to externalize behaviors as to be their online avatar, etc. Invisibility is the idea that you can't see others or be seen yourself, and so this restricts a lot of the immediate responses we normally get back in a regular conversation. You know, frowns, noises, engagement, all of those things are lost, and so we are less constrained and therefore can engage in more extreme behavior. And you know, we see this in it being easier to email or text someone something than to speak to them face to face, or comments and critiques being far more extreme because the creator's reaction is not available. And it's an understood psychological concept. The reason that when you look at a classic psychiatrist chair, that the therapist is sat behind the patient is the idea that this creates freer disclosure, that the invisibility of the space allows a person to be more open or truthful. The third factor is asynchronicity, which is that online conversations don't happen in a regular, immediate response manner. There is often significant time differences in even a conversation, but also everything on the internet exists in perpetuity. So posts and comments you read might be 10, 20 years old at this point, but they still exist the same way they did when they were first made. And we see this in communication. There are things like an emotional hit and run where someone says something emotive, either positively or negatively, but then they can leave the space and not return until they feel able to, if they feel able to. And consider that from the point of view of someone disclosing something about themselves or something horrid that happened to themselves, versus someone angry or trolling who just leaves a response and then they can move away and return to it when, if they want. This asynchronicity can also lead to rapid intimacy, and it's in the concept of hyperpersonal communication, but it can remove senses of awkwardness and allow a very effective loop of things like love bombing in a very short amount of time. Solipsistic introjection is perhaps the most difficult idea in the six to understand. It is the idea about how we interpret and read comments, text online, and the voices that we prescribe to it, and how that voice starts to bleed over into our own thoughts and our own identity, and how we imagine the person at the other end of the comment we're reading. You know, we will attach ideas and beliefs to them, and once again this comes into hyperpersonal communication that may not be true, and as such that can lead us to have different ideas and complete misinterpretations of what is being said. We may be projecting our own ideas, thoughts, and feelings onto a situation in order to fill in the gaps that would normally be present in a physical interaction. Disassociative imagination is about the experimentation and role play we attach to our online self and online avatar. So how does that avatar look, sound, behave, and how is that online self crafted in a different manner to our offline self? And the idea first emerged from online gaming role-playing spaces like World of Warcraft and Second Life.
In my second life, I was also a paper salesman, and I was also named Dwight. Absolutely everything was the same, except I could fly.
But the idea is more broadly about the experimentation we can do with our online self compared to our offline identity. The final axis is minimization of status and authority, and the internet is a great leveler. Anyone can enter any forum practically and leave a comment. Unfortunately, a lot of the physical ideas about authority come from physical and space-based ideas. So, uniforms, where they are, how they're acting, who is in charge of a situation. Those are all removed in an online landscape. And this can mean that you can raise points that you feel are important and say things, but it also means that it becomes increasingly difficult to look for expertise and, at some points, essentially truth in online spaces, because everyone is created equal and everyone's opinion is given equal validity, in the sense that you can't truly confirm who anyone is a lot of the time. The Online Disinhibition Effect isn't the entire story about how we behave online. Not all points are covered, and obviously with the rapidly changing landscape of the internet, as we move from more text-based to more video-based communication, for example, things are ultimately going to change. There are other theories to try and aid in a more complete explanation. For example, we have the Proteus Effect, which is the idea that our online avatars and how we design and make them starts to have an influence on how we behave. So if you make a tall, attractive avatar, when you are embodying that person in online environments, you will behave more confidently and more as if that is who you are. There's also SIDE, the social identity model of de-individuation effects, which is an explanation about how anonymity and group dynamics will start to cause group conformity. So the anonymity afforded by online spaces results in people adapting to whatever the social structure is of the online environment. This is why support groups can be extremely effective, because people begin to subscribe to the ideas presented in the group, and hopefully the helpful ideas, but also why forums can become radicalized and extremist as the anonymity causes group norms to be enforced. And
1 minute online
isn't
just a unit of time.
How
It's
the
a
online
look
environments
at the
are actually
world
shaping
and
us
how it
back.
is moving.
So finally, why do you act differently online? Well, it's because the online environment bends the social rules and changes the social contract, and so we act differently and model different behavior and ultimately form new identities in online spaces. Sometimes this allows us to explore and experiment, and sometimes that allows us to hurt and cause distress. But in both senses, it's here to stay, and what we really need to do is start looking at a more healthy and effective way for us to engage in online spaces, both from a personal and psychological, but also from a societal point of view. If you found this video interesting, please leave a like and subscribe, or share to someone who you think might enjoy this.